Welcome to the Growth Mindset in the Workplace workshop, facilitated by Ashely Odell. Brought to you by the UC Davis WorkLife unit with the HR, Talent Management, and Development. My name is Carmen Soriano, Learning and Development Analyst with UC Davis Talent Management and Development, serving as your moderator today. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind for the workshop. I'm sharing these items here. All the handouts for this workshop are now posted on the WorkLife webpage. You can find them by using the QR code that's posted here on the screen or the URL web address you see here. To use the QR code, you can open your camera on your phone, hover the QR code for a few seconds, and it should show you the link to direct you to where those handouts are. If you're not already familiar with Zoom, please take a moment and take a look at the bottom black banner of your screen. Be sure that your microphone is on mute and video stopped. Next, click on the icon labeled chat. This should open your group chat room. The chat room will be the best place to communicate technical issues with me as the moderator. The facilitator asks that you present your questions or contributions to the material verbally. To do so, please raise your hand feature. Use the raise the hand feature in the group chat. She will unmute your microphone to join conversation. You may have to allow her to invite the unmute, so keep an eye out for the pop-up invite. Also, the facilitator may not have time to cover all questions or feedback each participant is offering, but will do her best to reach as many as she can. She has availed herself to stay online after the workshop has concluded for further questions and is open to have private chat with personal topics. This workshop is scheduled to run until 1 p.m. However, due to the nature of the topic and nature flow of the presentation, along with your participation in the workshop, it may run over. No worries if you have to leave before or after 1 p.m. Please be assured that a recording and the materials will be made available to you on the WorkLife webpage. At the end of the workshop, I will provide you with a link to evaluation questionnaire. We ask that you would take a moment and complete the evaluation. Now I would like to introduce you to our guest of honor and your workshop facilitator. She provides research-based education and presentations combining the science of happiness, media literacy, and cultural awareness to address major factors contributing to the epidemic of unhappiness, anxiety, and depression in our communities and workplaces. She provides practical approaches and scientifically proven interventions based in positive psychology that will give individuals and groups the tools to achieve greater happiness and thereby improve organizational outcomes and community well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ashely Odell.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Give me 1 second while I share my screen. Because I have to switch from Carmen. All right. So, as Carmen said, my name is Ashely Odell, and I focus on providing education to workplaces, in addition to communities and youth, combining the science of positive psychology, which is also known as the science of happiness, with media education. So basically, positive psychology looks at what is right with you versus traditional psychology, which is looking at, getting you from a -5 to a 0. Positive psychology looks at getting you from neutral to a 5, or from a 5 to a 10, and has a lot of practical interventions and education to help you do that. And where my work is a little different is I combine education about media literacy and the culture, and really helping individuals look at some of the things that can cause unhappiness or dissatisfaction with our lives. So essentially, I'm giving you, tools to make you happy, and also tools to help prevent things that make you unhappy. So sort of the sword and the shield, as it were. Today's presentation is going to be focused on growth mindset. So this is a concept that is based, of course, in positive psychology, and it's a powerful model coming that can improve your self-concept, motivation, effort, and your approach to challenges, both in your work life as well as your life at home. So I'm getting a note that there's no audio. So let me I'm not on mute. So I'm wondering kind of what's happening. Oh, so it looks like some people can hear and some people can't. I'm hoping maybe Carmen can weigh in here. Okay, it looks like most people can hear. So perhaps Carmen can weigh in on the chat. And if you're having issues technically, she can jump in so I can keep going. There will be some.
Hi, Ashley. I think that it's device individual issue,
Okay.
so I can help on the chat.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. All right, sorry about that, everybody. So carrying on. So growth mindset can really have a strong impact both in your work environment as well as your home, and hopefully you'll learn some things that can apply to making your experience happier and more positive. So let's see. Now I'm having trouble advancing slide. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so it's important first to define mindset. So mindset is a set of beliefs or a thinking that determines one's behavior, outlook, and mental attitude. So I think the really important word there is belief. And this is something, it's a thought that you've repeated often, or something you're convinced yourself is true. So I think a lot of the time we assume the things that go through our head are truth. But really, this is kind of where this idea of neuroplasticity comes in. And some of you may have heard of this, but this is generally the idea that our brain is malleable or plastic. If we have a thought that we repeat over and over again, or a behavior that we repeat over and over again, it creates channels in the brain. And so the best way to kind of illustrate this is if you think about, let's say you're taking a sled down a snowy hill. And if you go down a few times, it's going to create a channel, and it's going to be easy for your sled to kind of go into that channel, right? So it'll be easier and easier to just fall into that same pattern of thinking or sledding, right? And the idea behind neuroplasticity is that we can actually change those patterns or that channel by taking a different approach, but we do need to practice it over and over again. So this is very core both to the to positive psychology, because part of positive psychology is the assumption that you can change the way you think, but it's also very important for growth mindset. And you'll see how that comes through as we move forward, but we really can change the way we think about things through intentional thought and action. So there are two sets of mindsets. So it looks like I have a bit of a delay on changing my slide. So bear with me here. Okay, 1 moment. All right, I'm gonna try and stop the share and then start it again. My apologies, everybody. Aren't technological issues so fun? All right, I think we're getting back on track. Bear with me. All right. There we go. Thank you. I'm going to have a growth mindset about technology. Why am I talking about mindset? Why is this important for you? So I'm going to talk about some very practical applications and why it's important in the workplace. But there's a big reason I like to talk about this that I think is very helpful to individuals. Carol Dweck, who is one of the main researchers about mindset, asks a couple of questions that really kind of gets to the core of why she's interested in mindset and why I also am interested in mindset. She asks, what if your true learning potential was unknown, even unknowable at best? And she also asks, what if it were impossible to foresee what you could accomplish with a few years of passion, toil, and training? And I think that this really gets at the core of growth mindset, the idea that you can be empowered by this concept to really accomplish almost anything. And that is very important for our work, but also in our personal lives. And it's also a great way to just think about ourselves. So in terms of what practical sort of tangible benefits that there are for your workplace, the right mindset can help workers transform failure into success through learning from mistakes. All of us fail, but there's different things we can do with our failure, and mindset can have an impact on that. Certain mindsets can impair employees' willingness to participate in new activities and ability to face challenging tasks. So in our jobs, we often are offered opportunities to do something new, or we come up against something that's very difficult for us. And the way that this plays out can really depend on your mindset. And I'll provide quite a few examples showing this. Employees with certain mindsets may be limiting themselves. So sometimes we don't take on new things because of the way we see ourselves or see the situation. And a lot of that has to do with mindset. And finally, the right mindset leaves people more open and responsive to feedback because it doesn't threaten their sense of self. Well, we're always getting feedback from our bosses, from our coworkers, from our clients, from our students, from our patients. And mindset can really help us use it in a useful way instead of feeling it as a threat. So there are two sets of mindsets. There's two mindsets that I really want to talk about, and this comes from Carol Dweck's research. There's growth mindset and fixed mindset. So growth mindset here I have represented by a ball of clay, so you can see it on the left. And growth mindset is the belief that you can change and grow and improve by applying effort and practice. So we can change a ball of clay by applying effort. So that's, I think, a good way to think of mindset is that your abilities, traits, skills, intelligence, character, and creative ability all can be adjusted through effort, training, education. Fixed mindset, on the other hand, I have represented by a rock. So a rock is very difficult to change no matter how much effort we apply. And that's really the basis of a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset assumes that abilities, traits, skills, character, intelligence, etc., are static, that they are givens. They are something that's inborn or something that's sort of natural versus something that can be changed or grown through effort. And you can see some of these quotes here that sort of give you examples of how these mindsets manifest. Things like, challenges help me grow, or I like to try new things, or I can learn to do anything I want, versus I'm either good at it or I'm not. My abilities are unchanging. I don't like to be challenged, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about how these things actually show up in people's lives and the beliefs that are associated and some of the behaviors that connect to those beliefs. So failure for somebody with a fixed mindset is seen as an identity. It's seen as something that's who you are instead of just something that happened. And it leads to this thought that I'm not talented enough. So I'm going to use a non-work example because I think it's a good illustration. So let's say, but it is a UC Davis example. Let's say you're taking a craft center class and you're learning how to do pottery. And if you do, your first couple of pots and they're really unattractive and just kind of not great, you may think, oh, I am a failure, or something like, I am not a good potter, right? So that identity being a failure. Versus somebody with a growth mindset, when they fail, they look at it as I failed. It's an action instead of an identity. And the resulting belief is I need to work harder. So if you have those ugly pots, right, from your pottery class, and you have a growth mindset, you go, well, I failed at those pots. I need to seek out, you know, additional help from the instructor. I need to spend more time in the studio, etc. Success looks different for the two mindsets as well. For somebody with a fixed mindset, when they succeed, it means they are smart and talented, they can rest. They have an inborn talent or a natural talent for whatever they're trying, and they don't have to do anything new for that. So let's say somebody is a very good meeting facilitator. If they're really good at facilitating meetings, if trainings come up on meeting facilitation, or there's somebody in their department that someone suggests they talk to about facilitating meetings, they wouldn't take up those opportunities because they think, well, I'm good at that. It's part of my identity. I don't need to put any effort into it because I'm already good at it. Somebody with a growth mindset sees success meaning that they learned something. So it's just proof that they put in effort and learned something new. And the resulting belief is or thought process is, what should I do to sustain that knowledge and to get better? So somebody who's a good meeting facilitator who has a growth mindset would take advantage of those training opportunities or a possible mentor, because they know that it took effort to get to where they are to be a good meeting facilitator, and additional effort and additional learning will only make them better or keep their knowledge up to date. Trying something new for somebody with a fixed mindset is a scary thing. And this is scary because it relates back to that idea of talents and ability and intelligence being part of identity and not being changeable. So if you try something new, generally you're going to struggle at the beginning, because that's just natural, right? That we struggle. But what they are worried about is that struggling will be shown to other people. So people will think that they are dumb or incompetent. So it's almost like showing your cards, right? Versus someone with a growth mindset, they see trying something new as an opportunity to learn, grow, or develop. They're okay with the fact that they will have to struggle at the beginning, and it'll be evident that they don't know how to do it yet, because that's okay. It's part of it. You know, it's all about learning. None of us know how to do it at the beginning. So this one makes me feel like a little sad. It's a little heartbreaking, right? Somebody with a fixed mindset only feels smart or capable if they have perfect performance right away. How many people perform perfectly right away when they try something? Almost none. So that's kind of sad or heartbreaking, as I say, because they often aren't feeling smart or capable, because things at the beginning are difficult and take effort. So they're gonna think, well, I'm not talented, I'm not good at that, right? So if you go into that pottery class, for example, and you're not, you know, developing gorgeous vases right away, you're gonna feel like, oh, I'm not smart or I'm not capable. A growth mindset, though, feels smart or capable when they learn something new. So it's not about being perfect, it's about learning. And finally, mindset can really impact your attitude towards others. And someone with a fixed mindset does have sort of an attitude that's based in judging mostly themselves, but also potentially other people. So you say, I am smart, or I am not a good potter, or I am not good at math, or I am very good at sewing. And then you could potentially also judge people, say, oh, they are really good at spreadsheets, or Joe is not a good public speaker. So you're judging people's and your own identity as a whole. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset, they tend to, you know, if somebody's not good at something, think, oh, well, they're just in the process of learning it, or maybe they need more help to learn it, versus they are good at that or they are not. And one of the big differences is if somebody's better at them than at something than them, they see them as a resource instead of as a threat, right? So in our work, where there's almost always somebody who's better at something than us, and it's often very easy to go, oh my gosh, they're better, they're gonna make me look bad, and that sort of fits the process. Versus if you're in a growth mindset, you are looking at them as someone to learn from, not as a threat. All right, so it looks like there's one question here. Okay, so moving on, I just double checking a couple of chat things, making sure we're good on that. All right, now we're getting stuck again. I'm very sorry, guys. Let's see. There we go. So one of the things I mentioned is belief is a big part of mindset. And our beliefs come from a variety of things, much of it from our upbringing, much of it from our culture, but a lot of it's going to come from the media around us. And we spend a lot of time consuming media. And it can have a strong impact on the way we form our beliefs. And what I think is really important to be aware of the media around us, because even as we're working on developing new mindsets, we may be getting messages that are confirming a certain type of mindset. And although there is certainly fixed mindset, or sorry, growth mindset in the media, a good example of that is The Blind Side. It's a movie about football mostly, but it's a really good growth mindset movie. I'd say the vast majority of my media is reinforcing a fixed mindset. So an example of this is A Beautiful Mind. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, it's about John Nash, who's a mathematician and a code breaker. And we don't get to see John Nash developing his mathematical skills. We don't get to see him studying. We don't get to see him putting in all this hard work. We only get to see him at the peak of his success, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later as a way of sort of reinforcing this idea that that talent is natural, that intelligence is inborn, things like that. But pulled from the trailer alone, there are several quotes that are really fixed mindset statements. They say in the trailer, he's one of the most brilliant minds of his generation. He has an extraordinary gift that set him apart. He's a natural code breaker. And he says in the trailer, the only way I'll ever matter is if he succeeds. And so it's all reinforcing this idea that we're born with a certain talent, and these are very fixed mindset statements. Another example of this is The Big Bang Theory. And for those of you who are not familiar with this television show, it's about physicists, a group of physicists, and they're friends with a woman named Penny, who is not a physicist, she's a waitress. And there's one episode in particular where Sheldon, one of the physicists, is trying to teach Penny physics because she wants to learn. And they spend, I don't know, 15 minutes on the lesson, and Sheldon gets frustrated because she's not learning it quickly and makes an assumption that she's just not really meant to learn physics. She just doesn't really have the mind for it. And Penny walks away feeling the same way. Oh, this isn't for me. This isn't something I can do. And that's a very fixed mindset way of operating. If they were in a growth mindset sort of state of mind, Sheldon would have known, well, it's going to take longer, it's going to take more practice and more effort and more learning for her to do this, but she can do it with that effort, instead of giving up and saying, oh, this just isn't for her. So I want all of you to be aware of the messages that we're getting in the media, because it is difficult, I think, to change our way of thinking when we're getting sort of contradictory messages on a frequent basis. And now we can all be aware of those messages. So one of the areas that I think culturally we think of, most of us think of as inborn, something that you can measure and that won't really change, is intelligence. So I like to look at intelligence as a way of exploring how mindset can impact ourselves and the way we see ourselves and the way we operate in the world. And this sequence that I'm going to show you can be applied to talents, to skills, to characteristics as well. But I think intelligence is one of those areas that we really need to kind of get out of that fixed mindset about it, because it's very common to have a fixed mindset about intelligence. So someone with a fixed mindset about intelligence believes that it's static, and meaning that it can't really change, right? You're born with a certain amount of intelligence, and you just got to work with what you have. This leads to a desire to look smart, because obviously we think it can't be changed, so we want to appear to others as if we have a high level of intelligence, and it's all about looks, right? And unfortunately, this leads to a tendency to avoid challenges, because challenges may show other people that maybe we're not as smart as we're trying to look, because if we come up against a challenge and things aren't easy, that just means we're not smart enough to handle it. We tend to give up easily when we come up against obstacles, because obstacles are, you know, if we can't overcome it, it just means we're not smart enough to overcome it. So we give up because there's nothing we can really do to improve our intelligence and be able to overcome the obstacle. And effort is seen as fruitless, meaning if I apply effort, nothing's really going to change because I was born with this amount of intelligence. Or worse, it's proof that you're not smart enough, right? So if you have to apply effort, you're just not smart enough to do whatever you're trying to do. Somebody with a growth mindset about intelligence believes it can be developed. It's not something you're born with, it's something you can actually grow. And this leads to a desire to learn, and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges. So once you come up against something difficult, it's like a hurdle to get over, to, you know, level up your intelligence, essentially. You persist in the face of setbacks. So when there's a setback, you know, okay, this isn't proof that I'm not intelligent enough. It's just proof that I need to get more learning, or find a mentor, or find some training so that I can learn how to overcome the setback. And effort is actually a good thing. Effort, it's like more like going to the gym, right? When we go to the gym, we kind of want it to hurt, right? Because when it hurts, we know we are growing our muscles. So effort, when we're, you know, I don't know, doing a math problem or writing a paper, is a good thing because we know we're learning. It also relates to feedback. So somebody with a fixed mindset ignores useful negative feedback, because negative feedback is almost like an attack on our identity, and somebody saying we're not smart enough, and that feels like a very difficult thing. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset, although you still may find feedback to be painful, you try to learn from it because it's an opportunity for growth. And the results between these two approaches are very different. So somebody who has a fixed mindset about intelligence is going to plateau pretty early and achieve less than their full potential of intelligence, because they won't overcome obstacles, they won't persist in the face of challenges, and they won't apply effort. And unfortunately, this is sort of an unempowering way of looking at the world, right? I'm dealt this hand, I have to just deal with that, and there's nothing I can really do to change it. Versus somebody with a growth mindset tend to get more and more intelligent, gain more and more intelligence through learning, because they're applying effort, they're overcoming challenges. And this gives them a greater sense of free will, right? I can increase my intelligence through my own efforts. So it allows you to kind of be in control of that. So you can see how this would have a very different impact on people's lives. So because I'm speaking at a university, and I also am very interested in the research, I provided you with a handout. One of the handouts on the link that Carmen gave you is growth mindset research. And it has a lot of studies. I promise it's just little summaries of the studies. You don't have to read the whole thing. But it gives you an idea of how growth mindset and fixed mindset have been looked at in a scientific setting and have been shown to be very impactful on people's lives, and something that can be changed. So I'd like you to take the time, probably after the workshop's over, to go ahead and read through the study so you can see how researchers have been looking at this concept. I think it's extremely important to acknowledge that there is individual difference, because I think sometimes people will learn about growth mindset and then think about people like Da Vinci or Stephen Hawking and say, you know, I don't know, I think some things are natural, right? Like, especially with people like Stephen Hawking or Da Vinci, right? But it's really important to remember that just because some people can do something with little or no training, it doesn't mean that others can't do it, and sometimes even do it better with training. So I think Carol Dweck would argue that even though, you know, Da Vinci is, you know, one of the most amazing painters ever, that if somebody had enough time and put in enough effort and practice and had excellent teachers and excellent training, that they could reach somewhere close to that level of talent. It might take them till they're 80 years old, but they might be able to do that. Luckily, most of us aren't comparing ourselves with Da Vinci or Stephen Hawking. We are comparing ourselves with our coworkers and the people around us. And sometimes things look like they're coming easily to other people, but that doesn't mean that we can't do it. It just means that we might need to put in a little bit more practice and training and be very strategic about it, because sometimes, you know, practicing one way works for somebody and practicing another way works for somebody else. So if something's working for us, we don't just hit our heads against the wall trying the same thing over and over again. We strategically try something new. So yes, there's individual difference. Some people just find things come easily to them, but that doesn't mean that you can't achieve that level of ability through effort. I think it's important to explain this with some examples. And this is another kind of exploration into how media sort of reinforces fixed mindset. So when we see people that are sort of our idols or these sort of titans of their field, we really only see them when they're successful. So we see just their success. And we don't see everything that went into that success. And so we make assumptions about talent and abilities based on just, you know, these people sort of pop into our awareness already successful, but we are not getting the full story. So I'm going to give you some examples of this. On the top left, we have Mark Cuban, and many of you may recognize him from the show Shark Tank. And he is a billionaire, and he made a lot of money in the stock market. And so some of his success certainly is luck, right? The stock market, there's a certain amount of luck there. But he had to put in a lot of work to benefit from that luck. When first starting his company, he routinely stayed up until 2 a.m. reading about new software, and he actually went 7 years without a vacation. So this man had to put in a lot of effort and a lot of time to get to where he is, even though it kind of looks like he's just this, you know, genius who woke up amazing at making money, right? Top right, we have Ed Sheeran. And he's a famous musician, for those of you who aren't aware. And I just pulled a quote. This is straight from his mouth. I'm not going to try and do the British accent. But he says, "People tell me that I'm born with a natural talent." I'm like, no, I just practice. So even Ed Sheeran is trying to, you know, sort of dispel that idea that he was just born being able to sing and write songs like he does. Bottom left, we have Venus and Serena Williams, and you may know them as these amazing tennis stars. They've been up hitting tennis balls at 6 a.m. since the time they were 7 and 8 years old. So it didn't come easily to them. They had to practice like crazy. And then finally, I have Mozart. And I include Mozart because I think he's almost a cliched example of a prodigy of what people think of as natural talent. And certainly he did have something special when it came to music. But what we see, his beautiful pieces of music, actually, it took Mozart 10 years of his life to create a piece that he found perfect enough to show the world. And unlike other artists, Mozart wanted to find faults in his own work. He actually applied quite a growth mindset approach to his music. He would listen to different compositions for hours on end and deliberately make changes to his own compositions and look for mistakes. So he knew that mistakes and failure are actually part of growth, and that allowed him to create the compositions that are so timeless and enduring today. So Carol Dweck says, "We like to think of our champions and idols as superheroes who were born different than us. We don't like to think of them as relatively ordinary people who made themselves extraordinary." And I think that that's so interesting, because I think we like that idea of superheroes, these magical people who are really, really good at things, but that's also a little unempowering, because we believe we can't reach that level of amazingness because we weren't born with whatever Mark Cuban or Ed Sheeran have. And I think sometimes that might be because it's scary to think about that amount of effort that you have to put in. And some people do find, you know, the risk of failure really a frightening thing. But all of these people failed. All of these people had to put in effort. So that helps you kind of get out of that, you know, fixed mindset thought process about people who are really good at things. So now we are going to have a little bit of time for discussion. So it's important to note that nobody has a completely growth mindset or a completely fixed mindset. We have growth mindset in some areas of our life and fixed mindset in some areas of our life. Even in just our job, we might be growth mindset in part of our job and fixed mindset in another part of our job. So I'm going to give you a personal example just to illustrate this. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to have you type in your responses into chat. And then I'll solicit 1 or 2 people to share by raising their hands. So we'll get to that in a second, but let me give you the examples first. So I have a very fixed mindset with mathematics. Even though I know about growth mindset, I can't seem to overcome this one. I just think of myself as not very good at math. This results in things like when my husband, or when we're out to dinner, I just push the check across the table to my husband to calculate the tip. And I, rely very heavily on my calculator. So what happens is I never actually get better at math because I don't want to do it because I think I'm not good at it. So definitely fixed mindset in that area. However, a couple of years ago, my husband and I decided to build our own home. And we had no idea how to build a house. We did most of it ourselves, like the framing and all the finish work. And I didn't even know how to use a nail gun going into this. But as I went into it, I knew, okay, well, I just need to learn how to do this. And I would reach out to people for help. As I used a nail gun, I made a lot of mistakes, but I didn't throw up my hands and say, oh, I'm horrible at using a nail gun and give up. I just asked for help, or I practiced it, and I saw improvements. So definitely growth mindset in that area. So now we're going to take a minute for you guys to respond into chat, where in your life you have either you got it or you don't mentality, and where you have a growth mindset in your life, where you say, yeah, I know I can grow and change in this. And then I will let you know when I want some verbal feedback. So I'll ask you to raise your hand, and I'll take 1 or 2 people's experiences if you like to share. And you don't have to. I'm just looking for a couple of people. All right, so I'll give you a minute or 2 to do this, and then I'll let you know when I want people to raise hands. So folks, if you are responding, if you don't mind responding to everyone with your growth and fixed mindset parts of your life, I think it's helpful for people to see where other people have fixed and growth mindset. So if you go to the 2 button and get the drop down, I think you can click everyone, and then everybody can see that, as long as you're comfortable with that, certainly. I'm seeing some good stuff come in. All right. So as you keep typing, but I'd like to get some sharing. I just want to make sure we kind of keep going in the interest of time. So if I can get some folks to raise their hand who are willing to share out loud their areas of fixed and growth mindset, I would love that. And it takes a second, I think, and you have to accept the raised hand, but go ahead and do that whenever you're ready. It should show up in chat for me. Hopefully it works. All right, anybody want to share? And it's possible that maybe Carmen, I don't know, Carmen, if you're getting the raised hands, because I'm not at this moment. I don't know if maybe you have to accept them. And I see that Marina's sharing that she's not seeing where to raise hand. Not all versions, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen, not all versions of Zoom have that. So if there is something you'd like me to share with the group, I can do that.
Hi, this is Carmen. So there are many versions, and I noticed that in some versions you can find the raise the hand feature in under the participant icon. But if folks would like to speak, you can type in the chat that they'd like a turn to speak, and we can go that route as well.
Okay, that sounds great. Nice. I'm seeing one. Here we go. Participants raised hand. I think maybe Carmen, since you're the host, you might have to allow them to raise their hand because it's not letting me click on
Okay, so I have Marina.
Yes.
She has raised her hand, and I've unmuted her.
Fantastic. Marina, share with us.
Hi. So my frustration for myself in terms of becoming more growth minded is feeling like I'm stuck with not enough time to learn the skills that are on my to-do list to be able to grow. And so I have a lot of frustration about that.
Yeah, so it sounds like your growth mindset about what you want to learn. So you understand that you need time to practice and apply those skills, but you feel like you don't have the time. And so that is, a frequent barrier to gaining the skills that folks want to do, because we do live in these insane busy lives. So that's sort of one of these things where there's no easy solution to that. It may be that you need to find time you need to prioritize, you need to say no to other things where it's not something that you really care about growing in a certain area. Sometimes there's actually very small things we can do to practice certain skills that sort of already work into the environment of our workload. So, without knowing exactly what you want to work on, it's hard for me to give specific advice about that. But I think that there are ways to integrate learning into our day-to-day. But yeah, occasionally we may have to make other sacrifices if it's something we're really, really passionate about learning. So thanks for saying that, because I think that that's a really important point. Unfortunately, without an easy answer, but it's something that I think a lot of people probably are also experiencing. So like my example of being a painter like Da Vinci, well, I probably don't have enough time to do that, but I've prioritized other things above that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I work in IT, and so I want to, build my skills in programming, and that takes quite a lot of time to study. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that may be something that, I don't know what your work environment's like, but perhaps, that could be seen as valuable to your organization, and you can share, with your supervisor, well, perhaps there's an opportunity to set aside time to do this, and again, it's just going to depend on everybody's individual situation, but that's a really, really good example. All right.
Ashely, we have one more raised hand. This is Danny.
Great. Hi, Danny. Go ahead and share. Are we waiting on an unmute?
Unmute now. Here we go. Sorry.
There we go.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. No, so the one thing that came to mind, first of all, the growth mindset. When it comes to family, I'm completely open to any type of feedback, input from anybody, because I really care about that stuff, right? I just simply want to get it right when it comes to raising my kids and things like that. But where I have the fixed mindset, I think, is where when it comes to work. And I think it's almost the opposite, where if I don't, I want to say, show or try to be as excellent as possible, I might lose my ability to provide for that same family, right? So I find myself, having to, get it right all the time. And if someone was to, like a supervisor was to tell me, hey, something, you didn't do this right, it's almost like the stress level just, goes up tremendously. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but that's I'm just trying to explain it there. But
yeah, you are.
So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that that is kind of a common thing. If we feel like we have a pressure on ourselves to perform, or the stakes are really high, that can sometimes engender a fixed mindset because we feel like failure is unacceptable. You know, we think about the potential consequences of the failure. You know, we sort of catastrophize sometimes, and that can make us just, you know, afraid to fail. You know, one of the things to think about is that, you know, looking at it as an opportunity for learning and to actually get better and to actually be able to maybe be even more invaluable to your organization and even more, you know, invaluable to your supervisor. And when they give you feedback, they really, most of the time, I know some supervisors are better than others, but most of the time they still think you're doing a good job. They just would like to see some improvement. And if they do see it, then that's something that is well respected, you know? So I think that that's a really good example and a very common one, where we see sort of, oh, the stakes are high, I don't want to fail, and I feel really, really bad if somebody says that I'm doing something wrong. And if, you know, you can, now that you've learned about growth mindset, thinking about, okay, you know, failure is part of, one, being human, and two, learning, and it actually can make me better, and actually make me more secure in my job. You know, that can be a good thing. And obviously, you know, there's some failures that don't make you more secure in your job, but you still have learned something from it no matter what. So whatever happens, you get to learn from it. So does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. In the interest of time, I think we're going to stop with 2. But I hope it's helped everybody to see each other's chat responses and to hear a little bit of feedback about growth and fixed mindset from folks in your organization. So we talked about what mindset is, what it kind of looks like for individuals, what it looks like for you guys, and now we're going to talk about the impact. So what does it actually do? What are the results of different mindsets in the workplace and beyond? So mindset can engender a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But first, I want to preface this with, I'm going to use sales as an example. And I'm using sales specifically because the outcome of sales is very, very clear. You get more sales or you get less sales, right? Many of our jobs have a little less clear outcomes. You know, let's say we work with the students, we may never really see what happens to the students. So I used to work in internship and career center at UC Davis, actually, and, you know, I would help them try and make career decisions, and I never really got to see the results of that. They never came back and told, well, rarely came back and told me what happened. So when learning about this concept, I like to use something that has clear outcomes, but this same self-fulfilling prophecy can show up in whatever job you are in, whatever outcomes are related to your job. So just keep that in mind as we move forward in explaining this. So somebody with a fixed mindset, if they're doing poorly at their job and they're a salesperson, so that means low sales, they're going to believe that they are a bad salesperson. So that's the belief that comes up for them. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset believes that selling is a skill set. Remember, we have growth mindset in different areas, but let's say a fixed and growth mindset in their job, or in this sales at least. So this can result in very different outcomes. So somebody with that fixed mindset, if they believe that they're a bad salesperson, the behavior that results from that is that they give up trying to improve. So why would I try to improve if I inherently am bad at sales? There's nothing I can do to improve because that's just not who I am. I'm not a good salesperson. And of course that results in a lack of sales because they didn't do anything to improve their poor sales. They didn't get training, they didn't get help, they didn't learn new techniques. And that reinforces the belief that they're a bad salesperson. And therefore you get this sort of downward spiral into, you know, bad sales. They may lose their job or just be very, you know, disenchanted with their job. And it's just a vicious cycle. Whereas a growth mindset belief about sales, as selling is a skill set, leads to a behavior of practicing and learning skills. So if you think it's a skill set, you know you need to go get training or go read about sales techniques and actually practice them, and go maybe find a mentor to help you. And then that, of course, results with time and practice. Certainly, it's not going to happen right away. But with time and practice, this results in more sales. And of course, that reinforces the belief that selling is a skill set. So then you'll continue to seek out new ways to develop that skill set, and your sales are going to get better and better. So you end up with this upward spiral, and you get better at your job, you might get promoted, etc. So you can see how growth and fixed mindset have very clear outcomes in a workplace. And so it's very, very important to be aware of your fixed mindset and try and adjust it to be more of a growth mindset belief. We're going to talk about how to do that. So a little bit of data about how mindset impacts organizations. So organizations that emphasize learning over inherent talent or intelligence, like inborn intelligence, are 46% more innovative. So they're more likely to be first to market with whatever product they're working on, because they're not as afraid of failure. They're okay with learning. They're okay with things, you know, being a little messy for a while. They're 58% more prepared to meet future demand. You know, it allows a little bit, again, for the less fear of failure, but adaptability to things, and 37% more productive. So you can see that, you know, emphasizing learning in your environment and individually in your work environment, in your work tasks, can have a strong impact organizationally. Mindset also has impact on the way you interact with other people in the workplace. So having a growth mindset facilitates teamwork, because you're not trying to look smart or look talented to your other coworkers. You're not afraid of messing up in front of your other coworkers. So it increases things like trust. So 47% likelier to trust your colleagues and see them as a resource, not competition. With a growth mindset organization, you're 34% likelier to feel a strong sense of commitment to the company. And this comes largely because learning and growth can engender loyalty. And finally, it can help develop excellent leaders who may be otherwise overlooked. So sometimes supervisors or people who are in a position to promote someone, you know, they're looking for somebody who appears competent all the time. And when people appear competent all the time, you know, sometimes they really are competent in everything, but a lot of the time it's somebody trying to look smart or look competent because, you know, they have a fixed mindset. Sometimes if we're looking at people who may take time to learn things or ask a lot of questions, you know, we have to see that as valuable. And it actually is really good, because growth mindset helps us in a lot of ways. It helps us grow. So we can actually measure our mindset, and I'm saying this in a preface to talking about changing your mindset. So understanding where you are on the spectrum of growth versus fixed mindset in general is helpful, I think, in developing mindset or growth mindset. So I've provided you one of the handouts on the link. It says growth mindset quiz. So this is an of growth versus fixed mindsets, and this is what Carol Dweck uses in her research when determining people's baseline levels of mindset. So I would highly recommend that you take that after we finish here today. You can also take a really short online version of it. It is not the full form assessment that used to be available online, but for whatever reason, Carol Dweck's website is not up right now. So there's a short one for you if you're interested. So, well, the whole point of this is that you learn how to change your mindset, and mindset can be changed. Remember, we talked about malleability of the brain, right? Neuroplasticity. And all you need to do is to practice a different way of thinking. If you have a fixed mindset, you need to create those new ruts in the snow for your sled, right? And that does take practice and repetition, but it's something that all of you can do. So Dweck had 4 steps to changing mindset, and I'm actually going to add a few more onto this later, you'll see, but for now, these are the 4 main steps steps for changing your mindset. Step one is to learn to hear your fixed mindset voices. So really paying attention to the way you're thinking. And a lot of us don't ever think about our thinking. So I'm challenging you to do this, to start listening to the beliefs that are in your head. And so, for example, if you're facing criticism, like somebody's giving you feedback, you might hear yourself say in your brain, well, it's not my fault. It was something or someone else's fault, or you might even say it out loud. Or you might feel yourself getting angry, and you're getting angry at the person giving you feedback, and you might be thinking something like, who do they think they are? So those are all sort of fixed mindset responses to, in this example, getting some feedback. The next step is to recognize that you have a choice. Remember, your beliefs aren't necessarily truth. They're just something that you've repeated many times in your brain. So you have a choice to not believe that, and you have to actually, take some action to change that. But that's where we get to step 3. Step 3 is to talk back, have an argument with that fixed mindset voice. You want to talk back to it with a growth mindset response. I'm going to provide several examples of this, but in this, feedback example, this would be something like saying to yourself, if I don't take responsibility, I can't fix it. Let me listen, however painful it is, and learn what I can. So, don't do this out loud, probably, because people will think it's weird that you're talking to yourself out loud, like Gollum, right? But you want to use the growth mindset tools that you've learned about and the way of thinking to sort of talk back to yourself, essentially. Then number 4 is to actually take the growth mindset action. And so having the dialogue, number 1 and 3, is a big part of it, but you actually want to solidify it and cement it with the action. And so in this case, it would be taking whatever feedback you got and first of all saying thank you, and then implementing, some of the information that person giving the feedback gave you. So actually taking that action is going to be a big part of that. So here are some examples of these dialogues that's sort of talking back to your fixed mindset, what it might look like. So if you're approaching a challenge, your fixed mindset might say something like, are you sure you can do it? Maybe you don't have the talents. And you would respond with something like, I'm not sure I can do it now, but I think I can learn with time and effort. So if you're taking on a new job responsibility, your fixed mindset might start questioning whether you think you can do it, and you need to talk back to yourself so that you can get past that and take on that new responsibility. Fixed mindset might say something like, what if you fail? You'll be a failure, right? And that thought process is going to keep you from trying something. But if you talk back to it and say something like, I failed, or I might fail, but I won't be a failure. Most successful people had failures along the way. This is an opportunity to learn from my mistakes and grow, and I will be even better in the future. So if you fail, you can use this, and if you're afraid of failing, you can use this. So another fixed mindset statement you might recognize is, if you don't try, you can protect yourself and keep your dignity. And it's very cliched, but the answer to this is, well, you miss all the shots you don't take, right? Or a less cliched way of responding is, if I don't try, I will automatically fail. Where's the dignity in that? And you can see the results would be different here, right? If you have that growth mindset thought process, well, hey, I might as well give it a try. It's okay if I fail. So you can use this also when you come up against a setback. All of us will find difficult parts in our work. We'll come up against something that seems very, very hard, or seems like a huge obstacle. And the automatic sort of fixed mindset approach to this might be something like, this would have been a snap if we really had talent. And the growth mindset response would be something like, that is so wrong. Basketball wasn't easy for Michael Jordan, and science wasn't easy for Thomas Edison. They had passion and they put intensive effort. So this kind of relates back to those examples that we presented earlier, like Mark Cuban and Ed Sheeran, where we see a success, but we don't see all the failure, sacrifice, hard work, etc., that relate to it. All right, so I realize that we're almost at 1 o'clock. I'm going to keep going. This recording is going to be available, I think, in the same webpage as the handouts. So you'll get all of this information if you have to go. You can come back and watch it. And I do apologize that we couldn't fit into the perfect perfect hour. It was tight with a little bit of the technical challenges, and I do apologize for that. So another thing very closely related to growth mindset and developing a growth or a fixed mindset is praise, actually. And you may recognize this, or this may resonate very strongly with you if you have kids, but this relates in our workplaces about how we talk to our colleagues and how we talk to ourselves and the way we praise each other. And so there are two types of praise. There's person praise and process praise. And person praise is praise that is really talking about the person's identity. It's sort of that fixed mindset identity focus, assuming that some kind of success was based on an inherent natural talent. So it's like if someone gets an A on an exam and you say, "You are so smart," that is person praise. And the problem with this is that if you give this sort of praise, then that person may be afraid to fail in the future because it will disprove your belief that they're smart. They may also be, sort of reinforcing that idea that they are smart as an identity and they don't have to put an effort in the future. So it is problematic. Versus process praise, which is really looking at the effort and learning that went into the success that you're seeing. So you would say, same situation if somebody got a good grade on a test. Instead of saying you were so smart, you would say something like, "You must have worked very hard to get these results." And that acknowledges the effort that goes into it. It doesn't engender that same fear of failure or that same sort of identity focus. It's about like what the effort that was put in, and you're really praising that. So this sort of enforces that idea of, oh, everything we do where we succeed, there is some kind of background to that. So we actually have an activity related to this. So in your growth mindset, self-talk, and praise worksheet that was linked also on that same page that Carmen shared, there is a chart where there are a couple of examples of how to translate process praise or process feedback or constructive criticism, person praise or person feedback into process praise. So you have a couple of examples and then an explanation of why it's better. And then I have some ones that are for you to practice. So, it's a combination of both feedback and praise. And so I'd like to spend some time translating that person praise into process praise so that you can sort of practice this and think about how you're providing praise to your colleagues, to your subordinates, to your kids, to your spouse, and really start to engender that growth mindset. By giving process praise that helps to enforce it in you and in others. Another great tool for developing a growth mindset is a single word, the word yet. And it can be extremely powerful to change a fixed mindset statement in your mind into a growth mindset statement. So listen to this statement: "I am not good at math." Now, that's very fixed mindset, but what if I add the word yet? I'm not very good at math yet. And that forces me to think about, well, what can I do to become good at math? And it also opens up the idea that, well, it's not something that is inborn or unchangeable. It's something that I can actually make a difference in. So I have the little yeti, right? The powerful yet-y to help you remember to put yet on the end of your fixed mindset statements. So I'd love you to take a minute. I'm going to keep going because I want to keep an eye on time, but I'd love you to take a minute to type in a fixed mindset statement that you've had about yourself and add the word yet. And then it'll really kind of help you start practicing that. All right, I promised you additional steps. So I kind of, in my research about growth mindset, have seen some other things that can really help develop a growth mindset, one of which is reframing failure. And I alluded to this a little bit when I was talking to Danny, but this is sort of a more focused explanation of this. Failure is a time to apply extra effort, and it'll allow you to improve your results, right? It helps you learn. It's really important to see what you've learned from it. And I actually have an activity related to failure. So in your growth mindset self-talk worksheet, I have a couple of questions that help you think about this. First of all, the first question on there is, if I knew I couldn't fail, I would. And this allows you to think about, well, wow, I really do have some fear of failure and it's stopping me from doing something I care about. And then after you kind of reflect on that a little bit, I want you to think about past failures. So a past failure mistake, and then what did you say to yourself about this failure mistake? So I'll give you an example. I got into a car accident, hit somebody's bumper, and the way I talked to myself wasn't very nice, because that's pretty common when we fail, right, is to be a little mean to ourselves. I said, oh, you're a horrible driver. I actually felt like a horrible person because I got a ticket. So I kind of felt like I was like almost like a criminal, right? It's a little extreme, of course, but I was having these feelings. But what I eventually was able to do is reframe the way I spoke to myself about this. Took me a while, right? These things can take a while, but I focused on what I learned from it. So I actually did learn that, well, hey, following that closely can lead to accidents. And it actually led to a change in my driving behavior, and improved me as a person, or as a driver, at least. I now drive in the slow lane. Like, it used to drive me crazy when my mom did that. Now I'm that person. So it was a failure. I talked to myself very negatively, but eventually I was able to look back and say, oh, I've learned something from that. So I'd like you to take some time to do that as well. What failures have you had in the past? How did you speak to yourself, and how could you reframe it? What did you learn from it? What did it lead to? What kind of outcomes? And a nice hint for that is to replace the word failing with the word learning. It's also really important that you acknowledge your imperfections. We all would love to be perfect, and some of us are perfectionists, and so we expect nothing but perfect. And hiding from your imperfections, it keeps you from growing. Because if you think you need to be 100% correct or 100% perfect all the time, it makes it so you won't try new things, because there's an option for failure. And so I'd really like it if you thought about, okay, what is imperfect about me, and celebrate it a little bit and be okay with it, because it is human, right? It is human to be imperfect. It's easy for me to say, but it's good for you to kind of at least think about that. Number 7, celebrate progress. Notice I don't say celebrate success. So I'm going to use that pottery class example again. So let's say you started with really, 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 really ugly pottery, and now you have just kind of ugly pottery, but it's still not perfect. It's still not exactly what you're going for, but you've improved. So part of developing a growth mindset is celebrating growth. It's celebrating learning. I've definitely learned something from my first ugly pots, and now I've progressed to only slightly ugly pots, and I want you to be very active in that celebration. Give yourself, write down how amazing you are at learning, right? How you've learned, or give yourself the proverbial pat on the back. Number 8 is accept feedback. So we talked a little bit about this in a variety of examples, but the challenge I would give you is to think about, try and approach feedback instead of getting defensive, which is very easy, and I am very guilty of this. So don't think that I'm preaching about this. I am definitely guilty of getting defensive. But I would give you one little tool to help you. First of all, think about what feedback you give yourself, because then sometimes that allows you to think, okay, yeah, maybe this is legitimate feedback. But the best thing you can do is to say thank you. Don't get defensive, just say thank you. Even though it's painful, no matter what, even if you have a growth mindset about criticism, it's still painful. But that first response of saying thank you starts you on the thought process of, well, maybe this is actually useful. And then maybe eventually you can actually hear it and use it and grow from it. Cultivate curiosity. So I really like this one, because if any of you have kids, I'm guessing you don't ever judge your kids for asking a million questions, or for not knowing something, or being really bad at something at first. But we all judge ourselves for that. Why do we do that as adults? When we're learning something new, it's the same as a kid learning something new. So I think it's important that you try and be like a child, act like they do on a daily basis, ask questions, live in wonderment, discover things around you, and focus on learning and growing instead of looking good, right? We're always afraid to ask questions or admit that we don't know something, but if we can challenge ourselves to do that, that's actually a great, curious way of living. I also have a handout related to this, I have some questions that activate curiosity and a growth mindset that's packaged in with your self-talk and praise worksheet. And these are some questions that engender growth mindset and also help you, just be more curious. So things like, what did I learn today? Or where can I get constructive feedback? Or do I know the outcome or goal I'm after? So these kinds of things can help you with growth mindset and be curious. Find inspiration in others. So I mentioned that, with growth mindset, you can see people who are better at you than something, are better than you at something. I struggle with that one for a second time, as an opportunity for growth. So what I would challenge you to do is find somebody at work, if they make you feel inadequate, even better, and ask to sit down with them for 10 or 20 minutes and say, I've noticed you're really good at blank. I'm wondering if you can talk to me about how you got there, how you learned this, and maybe some tips about how I can integrate this into my work. And number one, by hearing their story, it may help you understand that, oh yeah, it actually took them work to be able to do that thing that just looks so easy for them. And number two, it helps you create a connection with somebody that might be somebody who can teach you to be better. And of course, it also just makes connections with others. And number 11, cultivate a sense of purpose. So it's really important to keep the big picture in mind, to understand why you do the work you do. It helps inspire the effort that you need to put in order to apply a growth mindset, right? It's all about effort and learning. So understanding why you would put that effort in your job is really important, because we, of course, if we're going to put in a bunch of effort to getting new training and things like that, but we don't know why we're doing it, we're not going to want to. DWECK'S research showed that students, because a lot of our research was done with students, with a growth mindset had a greater sense of purpose. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I do actually have a workshop on purpose and meaning and finding that in your work. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. But there's a lot of self-reflection you can do to help you just sort of remind yourself why you do the work you do. In addition to our sort of individual steps, there are organizational steps. So if you're in a position to implement this in your work environment, some of these might be helpful. And even if you're not in a supervisory position, encouraging others to be aware of these things is going to help develop more of a growth mindset organization. First of all, teach about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Knowing about it, knowing about the malleable brain, that we can change the way we think, is very, very powerful. Understanding it is sort of the first step to changing it. Avoid labeling others. So instead of looking at somebody and saying they are smart, right? Because there's positive labeling and there's negative labeling, or they are not good at spreadsheets. Try and say, oh, well, maybe they just need some training on that. Or, oh, I think they put in a lot of effort to understanding, the nuances of our department. So really kind of getting into that more nuanced way of understanding other people's work. And give detailed process praise to subordinates, colleagues, and on appraisals. So many of us have to do the dreaded EPAR, right? Both either fill it out for ourselves or maybe do it for our employees. Try and use process praise in these sorts of feedback. Teach about deliberate practice. So this idea of deliberate practice is a purposeful and systematic practice to try and get better at something. So many of us may be given a new task in our job, but our bosses don't say to us, well, hey, you're going to want to put aside time to actually practice this new thing. We're just expected to kind of get it. So if you're a person in a position giving somebody new tasks in their job, try and tell them, hey, you may need to practice this, put some time aside to practice it. Or if you're a person getting the new task, right, being told to do a new task, put aside time to practice it. And remember that strategy is part of this. If something's not working for you to learn something, try a different approach. Don't just keep trying the same thing, because all of us learn differently. And finally, embrace Simon and Chase's 10-year or 10,000-hour rule. So this is the idea that to become world-class at something, like being a chess grandmaster, an Olympic athlete, or an internationally touring concert pianist, you have to put in, 10 years or 10,000 hours. So remember, we can't be expected to be perfect right away. That to be amazing at things, we have to put in a lot of time. So making that an expectation that growth is that growth takes time. If we can do that in an organization, it can help solve problems like the aforementioned, shared issue of I don't feel like I have the time. So if the organization can support that, that can really solve some of those individual problems. So that's it for me. I do have additional workshops. If you're interested, you can look at them on my website, ashleyroseodell.com. I'm also available via phone and email if you have some questions that come up later. This video is being recorded, so it is available for you at a later time if you'd like to watch it. And I'm going to stay on chat for a while and answer your questions. I'm going to try and go back through and see if there are ones that I missed, and then answer questions that come up. And I just want to say thank you for being here. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope that you can apply some of this to your own life, both at your job and beyond. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great holiday. Thank you. Oh, and it looks like one more thing. There is a questionnaire, just a reminder of this, that you can give some feedback about the presentation. So we'd appreciate it if you have the time to do that. And I'll let Carmen wrap up a bit, and then I'll just stay on and chat with you. If Carmen wanted to wrap up.
Oh, thanks, Ashely. No, I just want to thank everyone for attending and to take a moment and fill out the evaluation questionnaire. You can access that by using the QR code or the link listed there in the chat box. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Carmen.
You're welcome. Thank
you, everybody, for those of you who are not staying on chat. And I'm going to mute and just answer things by typing. And thanks again, everybody.